Hi everyone, welcome to the 14th of our Masterclass series, showcasing the ways we can build interesting things in Sciencebase. Today's tutorial we'll be discussing boats, buoyancy and aquatic vehicles. We will be covering how to build a boat that you can drive around using the modular vehicle system. We'll be covering the modular buoyancy component, specifically how that works. And finally we will also be covering off how to make this thing look pretty, and also finally finishing off with a recap on the platform zones, which we covered in a tutorial a few weeks ago. As usual, we're going to be starting in the scene that we've been using for the last couple of weeks because it's a nice convenient one, and I'll just show off, since I know that the stream quality last time wasn't so great, just where we finished off with the water component. I've had a little bit of time to sort of clean it up and make it a little bit better. We will be releasing this on our blog as a download. If you want to use it for any projects, that's fine, including other Unity 3D projects that are unrelated to Sciencebase. It's just a plain update off the Water 4 shader, but it's got a few new features that I think make it look kind of impressive. So without further ado, I'm going to clear the screen, and here we go. So this is our scene as before, and I'm going to stop moving the camera around so much. I'm going to try and just sort of let the stream come through on the changes we did to the water system, and give you guys a bit of a look at how this one works. So the first things first, I'm actually just going to have to duplicate this a bunch of times just to make a nice water area for our terrain. Now, we were using an asset before called Simono for our water system, which has got a nice automatic tiling system that will just create an infinite sized object. There's a couple of ways we can scale this water, and this probably is an important topic to come on. I'm just going to delete these old Water 4 components. Yes, we'll delete those. And as you can see here, we've got our nice thick Water 5 that is... It's a little bit green, but we've got the ability to tune that now. So if we're going to go back to our sort of tropical bluey green, I don't know if we're making this better or worse. There we go. That's how we'll put that up. So there we go. I'll be a little bit more conscious this time to give you guys a bit more visibility on exactly how things look at various angles. So, moving on. There's a couple of ways to scale water. Now, the reason we want to be a little bit careful with scaling water is the vertex count. So I have not built a dedicated water mesh for this. When you're using these vertex modified shaders, you'll notice that if I look at this in wireframe view, you'll see that it's moving along the wires. So I don't know again how easy that is to see, but you can sort of see the wireframes are the bits that are moving around. So you want the water to have a fair amount of density for the effect to look good. Generally speaking, I don't think there's too much impact as far as performance goes for having quite a lot of vertices in a scene, because they're nicely batched. The GPU will take care of them all at once. So what you could do is, instead of duplicating these tiles a whole bunch of times, which is what I'm going to do, instead what you do is you just create one big plane in Blender or something else, and then just set the density up to something really high and drop that into your scene. That would be a better approach than what I'm about to do. But since we just want quick and simple, just going to move those guys out of the way. We have got our tiles here. I'm just going to duplicate this a bunch of times. I'll do it all horizontally, and then I'll do vertically. So, incidentally, if you hold down the control key, Unity will lock to 1 meter increments. And because this tile is actually, I believe it's 10 meters aside, we can just snap it. It might be 20 meters aside, actually. So I'm just going to duplicate this a bunch of times. Now, if you've changed the default scale of the object, unfortunately a 1 meter tiling is not going to really work very well for you. Now, I was actually going to discuss that briefly. The other alternative to duplicating this a bunch of times is actually just to scale the base mesh. This has a downside, which I'm about to show you. So this one I'm going to go to, let's go to 20 times 20 times 20. And that is that as the vertex density gets lower, you get all these ugly little artifacts appearing. So generally speaking, probably better if you just modify the individual ones. So I'm just going to grab the last 4 I added, add a bunch more, we'll just keep going. This hopefully won't take terribly long. We'll do doublings on the next one. I just want to have a nice big area to wander around in, because one of the benefits of space is that you can have really huge regions, so it'd be a shame not to to show that off. So, incidentally, you can see the depth mapping working quite nicely there as it gets higher up. The tone of the water gets actually fairly robust and nice. Okay, so it's those guys, and I believe that's lined up. Just want to make sure we're not duplicating here. No, not lined up. Quite a few tiles here, but this generally is okay doing it this way. Unity will do something called batching, and when it batches, what it's going to do is actually going to merge all these meshes together and distribute them at once. So from a GPU perspective, if you want to tile lots and lots of the same objects, it's incredibly efficient on the GPU, and you won't really run into big performance problems doing that. Sheer frame rate will get you in the sheer volume of vertices and things will catch you in the end. But generally speaking, you have to get pretty big before that's a really big problem. The other approach is to use vertex snapping to join objects together. I'm not going to do that here because there's just too many vertices on this thing to properly line it up, but maybe I can on this corner. What you can do there is you can hold down, I'm just going to turn off animated materials first to make this easier. You can hold down the V key, and while you've got the V key, any vertex you select, like I say I'm mousing over this one, you can just snap to another vertex and it'll automatically snap and align models. So if you've got models that are coming from disparate asset sets and things that don't really have a great alignment, you can use that technique to line them up perfectly and smoothly. Okay, one more doubling and then we'll call this one a day. I think I've got a couple of thousand in here now. There we go. I might just do that exact same trick again. So just hold down V and then snap. And there we go. Now we've got our nice crystal clear water. In fact, there's probably something to be said about the smoothness of those waves. Maybe the shader needs to do that. We end up with 1400 components all parented off this one group, and we are just going to move the group around. So I'm just going to move that. In fact, I'm going to do this one more time. We're going to go up to 3,000 tiles. Again, this probably shouldn't be a problem. There's not really much in the way that's on these things. They're unscripted. They've very basic plane meshes. Shouldn't be a big performance issue. But I will use this vertex snapping because it's easier when you've got large numbers of objects selected. Okay. Great. I've got the right vertex. Horrible fears that I haven't. Yes, I haven't. What have I done? Doing this when on an animated material is slightly harder than not doing it. There we go. Now we've got these guys lined up. Perfect, I think. Double check by selecting another one. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so there we go. We've now got our giant water system. Maybe not the most efficient way of duplicating these objects, but it'll give us a starting point for our water. Okay, so we've got our nice looking tropical island here, and we need a boat. Now I have grabbed one off the Unity Asset Store. I have not looked at this model yet, which is probably a good way of starting because, frankly, Many of you will be bringing in models and things you've made from other environments or you've built in Blender or so forth. So the first thing we notice is the scale is wrong, and that's an issue with the mesh itself. So if we go into the model importer, we can actually set the scale factor. So this one was probably built at 1 meter, which we're about to find out. And wherever we are, yep, that looks a bit better. Okay, so we've got this. Now my guess is if that is in there, the model hasn't had a lot of attention paid to its materials, so we might just want to take a quick look at the materials and set them up right. Okay, so let's have a look at what you are. Okay, so this is using the legacy shaders, which are the old non-physically based rendering systems. We'll switch that over to the standard shader. And how smooth is this going to be? It's going to be quite smooth, I think. Generally speaking, it's either wet or slick plastic, so quite smooth is what we want. We want to get those sort of nice reflections and things. Texture resolution is a little bit low. Maybe we can upgrade that. I don't know what the resolution is. 1024, and it has a maximum size set, so let's just increase that and see what happens if it's actually got a 2048 on it. Yes, it does. In fact, what resolution is that texture? See if it goes up any higher. Texture resolution will have impacts on file size, but this won't be too bad because it's just a single texture that's acting as an atlas. If you look in here, and you can actually right click on this little bar here to get a full screen preview. Down the bottom you'll see the size, so this is 2.7 megabytes, which is frankly perfectly fine. That's not even using compression. If we compress it, it'll take a second to run, so I won't do that right now, but that should drop the size down even further. Now we do have this small issue that the water is leaking onto the boat. Now, there's a couple of ways of solving that problem. The way that is recommended is to get a cut into your shader. Now, to do that, you need to use the stencil buffer. I'm not going to go into that today, at least not unless I have time left over. The stencil buffer will allow you to exclude things from a shader, so you can actually make the water not render that section. Which is a way of sort of getting around the problem. But for today, we are going to get this and we're going to set it up as a boat. First things first, we need to add, I'm going to knock this animation component off and just get the blank there. Okay, so we need to set up a collider for it. Now, does this have any scales and things on it? No, all nice and even, great. Okay, so first things first. We need to add a, 1 second. Okay, so we need to add a modular buoyancy to this component. Now this needs a collider attached to the same object as the modular buoyancy. So I'm going to add a mesh collider to this. Now normally you just do it on the mesh itself, but I'm just going to drag that into the mesh for this one into the object here. And we should see that now we've got the collision mesh attached to it. Now, if you want this to work nicely, I guess we'd leave it as the full mesh. Now, there is probably something to be said for separating out the collision layers and things here. So we've got a collision mesh for buoyancy and a collision mesh for the player. I think for right now, we will just go ahead and use this mesh, and if we need to tweak it, we'll need to tweak it. The first thing we're doing is modular buoyancy. Now, modular buoyancy basically brings in a bunch of settings that come in on your object. There's also a component called modular boat, which okay, you don't have access to that yet in the live editor packs, but that one will be coming soon. That'll give you a few more controls to play around with here. Modular buoyancy is the starting point. Now, to get this to behave, we've got a couple of parameters to play with. The density is the first one. Now, the density represents the percentage, well, sorry, not the percentage, the per mil, so per 1,000 instead of per 100, that is occupied by water. So if water is 1,000, that is to say it fully occupies the space. 500 means that 50% of the space is air. That's basically how you control how buoyant the object is. So an object with a lower density is going to be more energetic at getting up to the surface. An object with higher density is going to be more likely to sink. We also have controls over things like gravity. There is a voxel limit and slices per axis. Those describe how the boat is sliced when we do for the buoyancy calculations. So the buoyancy, what it does is it actually subdivides the model into an area. So it'll basically do a grid, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, sort of down the middle, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. And then at the intersections of that grid, it will send probes down into the water, and depending on the water level at that point, it'll determine whether to add some force to push the boat back up. So the first thing first, if we just click play on this one, I'm just going to save my scene, as I usually do, and we'll probably have to wait a second when I hit play for the first time, as we've seen in previous editor packs, but I believe we are good to go. And I think I set up the water zone before. Just for reference, if you are doing this, you do need to add a water zone into your scene. I've covered that in a previous tutorial, but the basics is you just add a component called water zone, size the area to match your water, and that will just make sure that the system is aware that this is water. So when it does its probes to find out how far above the water it should be, you can get accurate readings. And the benefit of doing it in the zones means that if you've got, for instance, say you've got a pool that has a river that leads to an ocean, by using those water zones you can change the vertical height, so the boat will still float as it goes up and down. It won't sort of just magically have to do something in order to work across different height levels. So we're just waiting on Unity to hit play, and then we should be able to see the object bouncing up and down. Probably won't be anything too special. It may not even work correctly because we've probably got to tweak a couple of the settings, but we will be able to see that just as soon as Unity decides to release us to preview mode. The very first, I think I've said this before, but the very first time you hit play in a while, what it does is it rebuilds a lot of the internal caches, and they subsequent uses will be fine, but these first uses are always a little bit more problematic. There we go. I think that's the. It's the first time I've seen this. Hopefully nothing's unusual. Not quite sure what's going on. I'll just let it do it. It's doing it. My computer's got something else running in the background that's a bit slow. Sorry about this. Hopefully it won't too much longer. There we go. Alright. Okay, so I don't know what you're complaining about. Okay, well. Anyway. Ooh, that does not look healthy. Oh, because we've got... okay, so we've got a couple of issues here. First, our boat has decided that the correct water level is far underground. That might be on my end. And then the next thing, we might not have put a water zone in the scene. That's the other possibility. I might have forgotten that one. You can sort of see that it's got that bouncing motion there. And the other thing is I didn't clear off Simono. So we've got Simono and the water systems conflicting with each other. So I'm just going to find Simono, and we're going to disable that. And then we should be good to go. Okay. So I'm just going to see if I put a water zone. Did. And that water zone is very conveniently far underground. Okay, so we will fix that. I'll just set that to... Okay, alright, let's have a look at this guy instead. We may need to look at setting a water zone to its planar mode too. The water zone has an option for setting an infinitely sized water zone into the scene. Okay. Not sure why this is happening, but hopefully it won't happen every time we do this. Very much hope this doesn't happen every time we do this. I might just dig into it. I've probably done something stupid. It's very odd that it's writing a package. I don't know what that's all about. Okay, so we've got our boat somewhere around here. And also we've got our day-night cycle that needs to be disabled or fixed. Where's our boat gone? Oh, now our boat's... boat has decided that we're a little bit too far underground. I think that's again my water zone positioning, but let's just try increase the density a bit. Oh, sorry, decrease the density to make it a bit more energetic. Okay, so that's just going to hang on there. So our water zone. Let's name this object, just for convenience' sake. Ah, that would be why. The water zone is actually on the ground, but the water is a bit not at zero. We can see this little spike here that's actually telling us where it wants to get to, which you can see is actually hitting the surface of the water system. So as I bring the water down, so I might have a bit too much gravity being applied to this this boat. So might do that too. Okay. Just going to play around with a couple of these settings. I'm going to set it concave. I'm going to use a convex. She'll use this. I used to use convex. Okay. I'm just going to take the day-night cycle off as well, just to stop that interfering. Okay. Save our scene again. Now the next step will be rigging this up as a vehicle. So we just need to keep playing with these components until we get the buoyancy and things right. That will need to be adjusted on a per object basis to a degree. Things like the size of the object have some influence over how much buoyancy you need in order to get the object sort of right or upright. I think the other issue here is that it wasn't actually meshing the collider correctly, so it was treating the object as only having a single point in the middle of the object, so it was trying to get that to the surface rather than the bottom of the object, which is what it should be doing for the buoyancy system. So I'll just give this another second to give it a try, and then hopefully we're getting close to what we want for this vehicle. So the next step will be bringing up as a boat. Now if you watch the modular vehicle tutorial beforehand, you'll be able to see how we rigged up the boats there. This one, we've got a couple of options in terms of the forces on how this goes. I think we've lost our boat again. I think it's at the bottom of the ocean. Hopefully not for long. Oh no, not at the bottom of the ocean for the change. But not really high enough either. What we will do, I'm going to try and play with these settings until we get it doing what we want. So higher than 1,000 should sink if we do it, let it. Okay. So it's trying to get there. Maybe it is higher. I thought it was lower, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's try and give it a bit of a push, but it's beginning to get there. I'm just looking at seeing where it's actually pulling these axes from. So you can see the yeah. So it's unfortunately the mesh. I think we might need to offset this a little bit, but that's going to be an issue for another minute. So let's go to my water zone. This might be just cheating a little bit, but. Zone, object here. There we go. Okay. So I'm just trying to get this to. Whoop. Hey. Okay. So our boat is happily chugging along there. I'm just going to copy this position. And remember that for when I take it off, but just play around with this a bit more. I'm going to set the density up. I don't know, maybe I lower that. You can see it's sort of hovering around the place. Not quite where we want. add some drag to this too. It's got some angular drag, but we really want to add resistance to it. Because this angular momentum is causing a bit of instability there. And drag basically just means that it's got some resistance towards these angles. Set the mass up. Whoop, maybe a bad idea. Mass does not go up. Whoop, we lost the object somewhere. We have lost it. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to play around with these settings, but I'm going to first fix our water zone back. So, if you type the name of a component into the hierarchy, that will also give you the ability to search for objects with that component attached. So you just type the name of the component without any spaces, and it'll show up every object with that component attached. So I'll just do this here. Base component values, I set the extents to 3. Okay. So that was the values that we liked. And the water zone will give you a little bit of a preview of exactly where it covers, as you can see here. I think I've got those maybe slightly wrong, but we'll see. Okay, so water zone, slices per axis. I'm going to give it some more slices just to get that valid. And I think we can start on the modular vehicle stuff. So we've got some level of buoyancy there. Maybe it's a bit bouncy, but we can increase angular drag and things to pull that down if you need to. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the collision detection from discrete. Now, discrete is good for objects that aren't important, but if an object is important as far as sort of the physics interactions go, you want to set this to either continuous or continuous dynamic. Again, we cover this in the vehicles tutorial, but the short answer is it's how frequently the object receives updates from the physics system, and how it sort of handles collisions. And we're just going to set this to interpolate as well, so we get nice smooth movement. Okay, next thing we're going to do is going to add the modular vehicle. Now, modular vehicle. This guy is basically the core of everything we need. In fact, I think that what we should be doing is, in fact, not using the modular buoyancy, but using the buoyant setting on the modular vehicle component instead of doing that ourselves. I just want to double check. I've got the code for it in front of me just to make sure that is all set up right, because this is a rather new component and there might be some errata, but I think that's good to go. Okay. So, the next step is to add some core forces. Now, because this doesn't have, it does not have wheels or any other kind of common locomotion, we actually just going to use the cheat forces. Again, we covered those in the modular vehicles tutorial if you want to cover a bit more on those ones. But the basics of our modular vehicle. Okay, so I'm going to set the mass down to 1. Now, this will override the setting up there, and the reason I did that just because the buoyancy seemed to behave better when we had a lower mass. So we'll do that here. And that means we just need to be careful on the core forces that we use, making sure they work correctly. Now, boats, as far as I know, they only really go forward. So we'll do that forward. Blue axis is for the forward axis or the Z axis. So we'll give it a bit of force on the forward axis. We'll give it, say, 5 meters of forward axis. This may zoom along, it may not, but we'll have to test and see. Again, all kinds of vehicles, you just really need to spend a bit of time just testing them. We'll give it no strafe forces to a degree. We might give it some torque forces, though. So we'll add some rotational torque. Now, we've got this new setting for allow mouse torque, which means you can use the mouse to move things around. We'll add that in as well. Now, there is in here a tick box for wind zone forces. That is not active yet, so I don't recommend ticking it on until we've made it active. But that will theoretically let you use things like Unity Zone, wind zone. So if we have a look in here, we've actually got a wind zone already, which you can see. I don't know if we actually added that on camera or not. Hopefully we did. But as you can see here, this sort of defines the direction the wind is coming in, and you've got a couple of options for things like turbulence. And you'll see things like our trees, for example, will actually pay attention to the wind zone. As you can see, as I move it around, the trees will move with it. There's also the option for localized wind forces. If you want to do create an empty object, add a wind zone. The other option is for spherical, and you can actually make spherical areas where wind blows. This is not enabled on our modular vehicle components yet, but it will be added. And when we've got that in place, you'll be able to make sailboats and things that respond to local wind zones within the scene. Alright, so moving forward, this should be almost the starting point for this one. We just need to define two things. We need to find a seat route where this player is going to sit. So I'm going to create an empty child for that one, and I'm just going to place it here. I'm just using the Control-Shift-F key, which is the align object with view. Align with view, and that will actually move the object to where the scene camera that I'm looking at right now is positioned. So it just moved it to there. And this is a quick and convenient way of getting objects sort of positioned where you want. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like from a player perspective, and I'm just going to neutralize these rotations, just so it's nice and even. Doesn't have to be neutralized, but I am. I'll just call that seat. And I will drag that into the seat route. Now I need a ride animation. I don't know what I've got in the way of sits, but so we've got ride, sit. I have a generic sit pose. That is probably what we're looking for. I'll just have a quick look at that. Make sure it's what we want. Yep. So that's probably how we want the avatar to be positioned. And we should be good to go. Theoretically. So we'll have a look at this one. Just saving my scene again. I take it as a general good practice. It's up to you on doing this or not, but I usually save often. I find that you never know when something happens, so saving every time before you hit play is my personal best practice, developed over many, many years. And with the second, we should be able to get a really nice, well, maybe not really nice at first, but we should be able to get a vehicle set up that will behave the way we want it to. And I really would love to know what this is. This is not ours, incidentally. I don't know what third-party asset I've brought into this project that's decided to do this, but I wish it wouldn't. I'll figure that out at a later date. Okay, alright, so we should, in theory, have our boat somewhat floating above the water. I think we got those settings tuned in right. I don't know where it is. It's out here somewhere. Oh, that's why I couldn't find it. Wow, that's looking pretty good. Whoops. Okay, there is our boat, as you can see. Is it actually moving around enough? We ran into a small issue. This you'll see now and then. That is, in the editor, may not be the intended practice, but vehicles do de-res when they haven't been sat in for a while. It's to prevent in our main regions, because vehicles have special spawning mechanics, that is to say they can bypass the normal spawn limits within certain limitations. Because of that, we have vehicles clean themselves up if no one is actually actively using them. So after, I think it's around 15-30 seconds, a vehicle that's got no occupant will disappear. And that will also apply for vehicles that you summon into the scene. And the specific reasons and rules behind that is because vehicles can be created in regions that otherwise don't allow objects to be added to the region. We've sort of tried to balance between sort of what creators want and what users want in terms of accessibility, so there is a sort of separate set of rules that cover vehicles specifically. The new pet system has a similar set of rules. Okay, now I have done something. So it's Playway doing that. Right, well, I will remove, what have I done? I have missed something, no doubt. So the first thing to do first, I'm just going to knock Playway out, because if that's what's doing the save, which I think that's what that's telling me it will. I don't use that in this scene, so it should be fine to remove. Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick look at what that specific error is. Let's come up. Again, if you run into problems building things, please do reach out. We're now active in the in-world developer chat. We've just added that over the last week on top of the Skype chats. Let's invoke. Engine sound. Needs to activate the vehicle. So it's on base, activate vehicle. to behave. Again, I keep making the mistake of running experimental editor packs while doing these because we often add new features and it's nice to be able to talk about them, but the downside is that I'm using ones that are even more unstable than the experimental packs we hand out now and then. Apparently that was not what is causing this. We'll have to find it out. It's one of these downsides that when you're using a lot of third-party assets, sometimes they do things that you don't necessarily want. You're generally safe with 3D models, but when you start getting into script and editor extensions and things, they add various things to your editor that may or may not be a good thing. Just want to dig into this in a second. At least it does appear to be getting faster with that particular error. Okay, so the reason it's not moving when we first create it, and that is because vehicles actually come in as kinematic. That is to say they have no external movements until we actually get on them. So I'm just going to make sure I've got all of this set up correctly. Everything down here looks correct. Primary camera is... there is our fault, I think. I just need to verify that. I did not put a camera on this. That is something I should have known from the ones we've done before. We need to set up a virtual camera on this object that just sort of defines where the camera is going from. I'll get a better error message on that, but let's create an empty child here. And what we'll do is we'll just set the Sin Machine virtual camera. And I'm just going to add a camera into the scene just to preview it. So I'm just going to make sure, one, there isn't other cameras in the scene. I do have that one, and that one I think we want to remove because we're not using this. Alright, so we've got that Sin Machine camera, and we're just going to add a camera to the scene. We're going to add a Sin Machine brain to it. This is just for previewing Sin Machine cameras. You just need to have a camera around that can interface with it. And then finally, on this one, we're going to take a look at exactly how this is set. So first things first, we're just going to set the target. Just going to the op prefab. It's going to follow the op prefab. And immediately we can sort of see where it's looking. So we're going to set it to a composer and a transposer. And you can sort of see where it's looking, which is right against that transparent hull there. And we're just going to change some offsets. So the first thing is we're going to add the follow offset. We're going to set this to much further back. I'm going to try and aim for a smaller zone. And finally, the screen Y. I think you still want it up higher when you're driving. This all comes down to personal preference as a designer, exactly where you want this thing to go. We do have the support for secondary cameras to be plugged into a vehicle to let you play around with a bit more. Okay, so I think that's probably what we want for our thing. We'll just remember to set the priority up to 10,000. So when this is active, where's field of view? Do we want to make the field of view bigger, smaller? Yeah, I'd say 40 feels about right. Okay, I think that works. So I'll just take our camera out. So we've got camera here and again, and we'll just slot that primary camera in to the slot. Otherwise, I think this is okay. So again, I'm just going to make sure this is all good to go, and then fingers crossed we've got what we want. Okay. I'm just going to take a look and hopefully we don't get that error again. If we do, I might downgrade to a previous editor pack, but I'd rather not do that if I can possibly avoid it on this video. Dun, 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 dun. I have done something. Okay, so I'll diagnose it. So to reconcile an object, I may need to probably even consider doing a part 2 on this tutorial, maybe later today after I've downgraded my editor pack, if I need to. Rather not, but is a possibility. I'm just going to take a quick look at my player char config because that probably is the cause. What I may do is just very quickly, I might just try the other way, the old way of bringing an avatar in, and just see if that makes a difference. Apologise for this, this is live debugging. I have accidentally left that camera on this scene, but that's a very good sign that our object is working, because previously that did not. So just make sure that's the case. I forgot to disable that. Again, we'll just save, hit play, and I think that might be it. Incidentally, the Cinemachine camera rig is actually extremely powerful, and it is embedded in the system. If you want to make cameras that sort of have multiple shots available, so if the object is occluded, say for example we've got that camera on the back of the boat there, if we're up against a cliff, we would rather the camera didn't go through the cliff, we would like the camera to switch to another camera, for example. There is a system in there called the Cinemachine Camera Cloud, which might be another topic. I actually may go into doing a dedicated class on Cinemachine at some point, because I think it's a underutilized tool that has got a tremendous amount of power attached to it. Just again, waiting. It's a bit more than usual. Next time I will actually test this beforehand. Unfortunately, I was a bit pressed for time this week. It's been one thing after the other with all the various releases we've got going out the door. Okay, so I've got my camera back. Okay, well, it's interesting. I think we actually do have motion controls here. It's just not very responsive. I need to just double click. No, we don't. Interesting. Okay, what I might do is I might actually just come back to this class afterwards. I might redo a few of these bits just to show the finished working product, because the setup process that we've got here is correct as far as I'm aware. This is sort of the basic process that you go for with vehicles. It should be a relatively straightforward process. I'll just knock back to a previous editor pack and update, and maybe do another quick update in about half an hour or so after we've got Actually, we'll do it in an hour after we've done our community office hours. So there was some other things I did want to set up here on this boat, besides getting the core vehicle stuff working. And that is today's, I want to cover off the platform zones. That is that if we've got avatars that are sort of walking around on this boat, we would rather the avatars didn't sort of turf into the oceans the moment the boat moves forward. We have covered this on a previous class. These guys are pretty straightforward. They're called platform zones. So I've just got an empty zone there, an empty object there. We're just going to add a box collider to it. And basically what platform zones do is they, we'll add a platform zone, and we'll just set this to is trigger. Now this basically will drag everything along with it. So this area, this box that we've created, we can actually just expand the width of this to roughly match the walkable area of the boat. And we'll even add the top of the boat just in case someone decides to sort of hang around up there. We'll just get this, roughly speaking, centered and aligned with the object. Give it a little bit more, err on the side of giving it more slack than less, just because the entry and exit points can be a little bit fuzzy on the box. So we've got that there, and I'm just going to twist this just so we're more closely aligned to the areas that you can actually walk on. I might make that a little bit taller. In fact, we need to make that a bit taller just to cover that top if people are walking around up here. So what this does is, when it's got a platform zone attached, is basically that any avatar that enters the area will get sucked and attached to what we've got here. It won't actually be attached, but what will happen is that movement applied to the object, which is this area, that will be transposed and reapplied to the avatar every single frame. And the benefit of that means that you can walk around inside the zone, you can walk around on top of a moving vehicle, that kind of thing, and it makes for a more interesting environment. The other thing I wanted to cover off was trail renderers. Now, we covered those for doing tire tracks previously, but there is actually a lot of potential here for boats. We actually did an effect in a game about 2 years ago where we got a really nice effect on the boat using a trail renderer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one extra component to this called a trail renderer. Now, if you've used the trail render component, you'll recognize this. Basically, as we move it around, it's going to leave a trail. Now, we could use this for boat wakes. Now, the problem with the trail render is it's not going to steer off sideways. That is to say that we can't have it go like that. It's got to follow the object. But there is a way we can get that same effect. So I'll just put this in the air to begin with. And what we'll do is we will adjust the end size. Now, there is a trick here. And how do we do this? It's over here. I guess they've added the new curve. This is a new system in Unity that I haven't actually played much with yet. So we'll set the wake to be like this, and basically you can immediately recognize that that's sort of the way the wake looks on a boat. So it tends to be pretty straight. That's how we'll do it. We'll go even a bit further. So it's fairly flat curve. And we're going to set the width up quite a lot. So I'm going to set the width to 50. Now, watch this. So that's sort of our wake. Now the problem is the alignment's set to view rather than local. So now, whoops, set that to. Now we've got an alignment somewhere in here. I don't know exactly where it's going, but we just need to twist this around a bit. Is that the alignment we want? Yes, it is. So immediately we can see that this is going to do what we want. And so look how this looks. We don't, I think, have vertices. But now, oops, went a bit crazy, but now you can see as the boat moves, we'll have this nice, elegant wake. Now, to get those sort of twin wake effects, what we do is we actually do it in the material. And this is a quick way of getting a nice looking wake. We're just going to do this in Photoshop. You can make a much better texture than I can in 2 minutes, because that's exactly how long I've got. One second. Oh, come on, you don't need to freeze up either. This is the downsides to recording things. Okay, alright, so we've got our thing. I'm not going to use that brush, I'm just going to use this. I'm going to make a nice nice wake texture of sorts. In fact, because of the way it's stretched, we don't even do that. What we do is we actually just do a plain pair of lines. And we'll just flip those around, we'll delete the old transparency. I'm just going to save the Photoshop file directly into this folder. Where's the yacht? And we're just going to save it as a PSD. So wake. Great thing about Unity is it actually has support for PSDs. So this PSD that I've just saved, after a second, should reappear in our project, which it does. And as you can see, there's a nice alpha channel already pre-imported. I'm just going to material. For this, I'm probably just going to use alpha blend. It's up to you sort of which materials and shaders you use, but particles / alpha blend would probably be the right one for this one. Might even use the pre-multiplied, but we'll have a look. Grab the wake, see how this exactly looks. So we've got our game object with there, we'll drag our wake material in to the materials, and now that might not be ideal. The particles alpha blended, there we go. Okay, so now we've got our basic wake. You guys can do much better with than the quick texture that I just did. So we've got that as our starting point. The next thing we're just going to do, I'm going to also change the render order so it renders over the top of the water. That we will do as a bit of a trick, but what I want to do is I actually want to set the gradient here. So you can see here that the old one fades out. I might do that so it's only towards the end it begins to fade out. Now you notice here that what's happening is that there's a bit of, as they overlap, you see changes in brightness. That is because the shader we're using for this water is not writing to the depth texture. We can change that. So if we change this to, for instance, let's say hypothetically we change it to the standard shader, and if we set it to cutout, for instance, this will work a lot better. The downside using the standard shader versus the particle shaders is that the color gradient won't work. So we need to really use all sorts of various tricks to get this one to look right. So just keep that there. Okay. So what are we doing here? We are we can even do flipbooks on this one. I actually have not played with this too much yet. Now, can we actually set... we can enable distortion in this one too. I haven't actually tried this, but let's, for the sake of it, let's add a normal map. Looks kind of... don't know how this thing's going to look exactly, but fun to play around with a bit. That actually needs a normal map at all. Or if we can duplicate the... There is our basic trail. And to just get this to, one, to draw over the water, we just need to set the Q to something higher. It's currently in 3000, we might set that to 3001 or something. And the other thing is I'm just going to put that height down. Okay, so now as this yacht moves, we get sort of a wake effect attached to it. As I said, you guys can do better, and we will just set the let's say so is 3100. Now this moves around, it should be more consistent. Yeah. And not interfere with the water itself. So that's how you can do that. I think that covers off the basics of what we wanted to cover today. What I will do is I will just quickly test the editor pack just so we can get a nice quick video of it driving around and tweaking the settings. I mean, most of that's exactly the same as what is in the modular vehicle tutorial. There's not too much new there. I do advise watching that one first. It's a bit late for saying that now. However, our community team have their office hours now. If you're interested in hearing what's up, they've made some changes to the format. I think we're going to actually see a few creator items and things as part of the new scheme, but this is basically the basics of building big boats in space, and the really great thing is because we've got the ability to make regions of almost unlimited size, you can make huge boating areas within your environments and really go for your life. There's so much you can do with buoyancy and all the other things that just mix and match with everything else. Next week, what I'm going to be trying to do is doing another series similar to this region. We're going to do a demolition derby, so we're actually going to build a couple of different components. My goal with the series is to cover physics joints, which we missed out on in the previous vehicles tutorials, showing destructible components and things that you can attach to vehicles, which I think should be fun. We'll discuss into scripting, which I have not covered up to now. We'll do some scripting, building scoreboards, that kind of thing, and see what we can do. And then finally, we'll set this all up, and maybe we can have a run with it. I would like to finish up ideally with doing a workshop day where we come back and everyone who participates in these tutorials gets to have a look and build a vehicle for the derby towards the end. We'll put a prize up for the winner. Okay, well, thank you all for watching. The office hours for the community team will now start in the Welcome Centre, and I will see you all there. Fantastic. Thank you, guys.